There was a time when jam didn't come from the store. It came from the garden, picked by hand, cooked slowly, and sealed in jars with care. Our grandmothers knew exactly which fruit made the firmest set, the brightest color, or the richest flavor. In this video, we're revealing 15 old garden crops they used to make the best jams. Let us start with a classic, gooseberry. Gooseberry bushes used to grow in the back corners of every garden. The berries were small, green or reddish, and covered in a fine fuzz. Eaten raw, they puckered your mouth, but once cooked down with sugar, they transformed. Gooseberry jam had a firm, almost jelly-like consistency thanks to its high natural pectin. The flavor stayed sharp, tart, and bright, cutting through the sweetness in the best way. It wasn't the jam you slathered thick. It was a grown-up flavor, often served in small spoonfuls on buttered toast or used in cakes with cream cheese fillings. Some grandmas used underripe berries on purpose to make the jam set extra firm. Smaller and more tannic than modern dessert plums, damsons were grown specifically for cooking. Their thick skins and bold flavor made them ideal for jam. Once stewed down, the fruit turned deep, inky purple, creating a jam that was thick, tangy, and rich. It had a wine-like depth with a slight bitterness at the edge that made it perfect for adults' palates. Many grandmothers would spice it with cloves or cinnamon, especially for winter batches. It paired beautifully with crusty bread, cottage cheese, or was used as a base layer in holiday tortillas. The consistency was dense and luxurious, never runny. Technically a vegetable, rhubarb found its place in nearly every jam pot. Its vivid red stalks had a sharp acidity and fibrous texture that melted into a soft, loose jam when simmered. Rarely used on its own, rhubarb was typically combined with sweeter fruits like strawberries or apples to balance its intense sourness. When cooked properly, the jam came out thinner and spread more like a compote. Grandmas often prepared it in early spring, when there was little else to harvest. It wasn't the jam you kept in the pantry all winter, but something bright and sharp to enjoy fresh, often used as a pancake topping or stirred into yogurt. Red currants grew in tidy clusters that looked like strings of rubies. Their flavor was intensely tart and fresh, with a slight bitterness in the skin. Because of their high pectin content, they made exceptional jam or jelly, firm, glossy, and bright red. Most grandmas didn't make true jam from them, but opted for jelly, straining the seeds and skins to create a smooth, jewel-toned preserve. It wasn't something you'd eat by the spoonful. It was a tangy, elegant jam used sparingly on biscuits, layered in holiday cookies, or served with roast meats as a sweet-sour condiment. This was a jam for special occasions, not the everyday peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Blackberries didn't need planting, just a walk along the fence line. Big, juicy, and dark as night, they were one of the richest fruits for jam, but they came with seeds, lots of them, and each family had their own take. Some strained them out for a silky finish, while others left them in for a chunky, rustic texture. The flavor of blackberry jam was deep and slightly earthy, not overly sweet, with just enough tartness to feel balanced. It was thicker and darker than strawberry jam and stuck to a spoon like molasses. Grandma often used it in sandwich cookies or served it with sharp cheddar and fresh bread. Elderberries weren't just beautiful, they were grown for jam. These small, glossy blackberries grew in umbrella-like clusters on tall shrubs and were usually ready by late summer. Raw, they were unpleasant, bitter and slightly toxic, but once cooked with sugar, they mellowed into something rich and deep. Elderberry jam was thinner than most, closer to a syrup or loose preserve. It had a dark, winey taste with subtle bitterness and was often used for cold remedies as much as for toast. Many grandmothers kept elderberry jars as a pantry staple, just in case, served on warm bread, stirred into porridge, or even spooned over meat as a glaze. Crabapples used to grow in almost every yard or along the edges of fields. But people didn't eat them raw. They were usually way too sour and had a strong, puckering taste. In the kitchen, though, they were something special. Because they're full of natural pectin, crabapples were perfect for making jelly. The jelly came out with a soft pink color and a bright, tart sweet flavor. It was thick and firm enough that you could actually slice it with a knife. People spread it on toast, served it with biscuits, and even used it to glaze ham or pork roasts. Around the holidays, some grandmas added cinnamon or cloves to give it a cozy, spiced flavor. Next, we have Concord Grapes. These weren't like the seedless ones from the store. Concords were thick-skinned, slippery, and full of seeds. But what a smell! Their intense, musky aroma filled the whole house when cooked. Making jam from them took time. You had to slip the skins, remove seeds, and cook everything separately. But the payoff was a jam so thick and flavorful, it practically stood on its own. The flavor was bold, sweet, tangy, with a slight floral aftertaste. The texture was smooth with bits of pulp, and the color was a deep purple, nearly black. It was a Sunday breakfast favorite on hot biscuits or with peanut butter on fresh bread. Quince looked like a cross between a pear and an apple, but you couldn't bite into one raw. It was rock hard and astringent. But once cooked, the transformation was stunning. The flesh turned pinkish gold, the texture softened to a tender gel, and the taste became floral, slightly spicy, and delicately sweet. Quince jam was often slow-cooked, producing a thick, sliceable preserve with a velvety finish. Grandmothers usually made small batches, sometimes adding lemon or cardamom. It was a holiday treat, often served on crackers or hard toast, and made its way onto cheese boards before that was even a trend. Rarely grown today, quince was once considered a fancy jam for special occasions. Chokecherries grew wild and were gathered more than grown. Small, dark, and very astringent raw, they needed careful cooking to become palatable. The resulting jam was dark red, almost black, with a sharp tang and a hint of bitterness. It was popular on farms and in rural areas where resources were limited and flavor mattered. The jam was often mixed with other fruits or thinned into syrup, but alone it had a boldness that older folks appreciated. It paired best with cornbread, and sometimes a spoonful was stirred into tea. Not sweet by modern standards, but unforgettable once you acquired the taste. Mulberries were often planted by grandparents and home gardeners along fences or at the far end of the yard, where their tall, sprawling branches had room to grow. Once ripe, the berries would fall in bunches, staining sidewalks, laundry lines, and anything else in their path. The fruit was long, dark purple, and sweet with a gentle tartness and soft, juicy flesh. Too delicate to ever make it to the grocery store, mulberries had to be eaten fresh or turned into jam right away. Mulberry jam was thinner than most, almost syrupy, with a mellow sweetness and a hint of earthiness. Some said it tasted like a milder blackberry. It wasn't the most eye-catching jam on the shelf, but it was deeply comforting, spooned onto pancakes or swirled into a warm bowl of oatmeal. Strawberries came in many kinds, some large and firm, others tiny and wild, almost melting when touched. The older garden varieties weren't built for shipping. They were fragile but packed with flavor. Strawberry jam was a summer essential. The small, soft berries cooked quickly into a thick, chunky jam with a bright, sweet flavor and just a hint of tang. Wild strawberries, when used, gave a stronger aroma and richer taste, though it took a lot to make even one small jar. This jam had more body than store-bought, often with bits of fruit still visible, and it clung to a spoon. Grandmas would seal it in rows of jars, always with one or two set aside for a birthday sponge cake. Raspberries, whether red, golden, or black, were always a garden favorite. Their soft berries crushed easily between your fingers, so they had to be picked with care. The jam they made was bold, tangy sweet, and often packed with seeds. Some grandmothers strained it for a smooth finish, others left the seeds in for that familiar, homey texture. It was one of the first jars to disappear from the pantry. It went well with buttered toast, shortbread, or even layered into trifles. Because raspberries broke down so quickly, the jam had a loose, soft set, but the flavor made up for it tenfold. Wrapped in papery husks like tiny lanterns, ground cherries were once a quiet favorite in backyard gardens. They looked like golden cherry tomatoes, but their flavor was sweet and tropical, like pineapple with a hint of vanilla. The jam they made was smooth, golden, and richly aromatic. Grandmas often grew these in hidden corners of the garden, and the jam was considered a rare treat. It was excellent on scones, waffles, or as filling for small tarts. Today, very few remember them, but for those who do, it was one of the most unique jams ever made at home. The pawpaw is North America's largest native fruit, once grown in homesteads and forest edges. It looks like a mango but has soft, custard-like flesh that tastes somewhere between banana, melon, and vanilla pudding. Pawpaw jam was thick, creamy, and naturally sweet. No need to add much sugar. Its texture resembled a smooth fruit butter more than a traditional jam, and it was often made in small batches because pawpaws spoil quickly. Some grandmas mixed it with lemon to balance its richness or spiced it with nutmeg. Served cold on toast or warm in pies, pawpaw jam was a silky surprise that's nearly vanished from the modern pantry.